All right, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the writing process, and it is just what it says. It's a process. Writing is not an easy task. It's not one that many people enjoy, but it is one that if you learn the formula and you practice the formula, you will get better at it. Just like math equations and math formulas, the writing process, the writing formula can make it easier for you to do this task if you just commit to it. So I'm going to be going through this presentation. It's divided into different sections, so feel free to fast forward to the section that you need as you need it. So let's go ahead and get started with the writing process. Okay, first of all, here on your screen, you're going to see a detailed outline of what a 4-paragraph paper would look like and how it should be structured, beginning with the introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and the conclusion. So this is just a good point of reference for you to come back to. Again, it basically outlines exactly what should be in your paper. Note that if you follow the outline in the introduction, you'll have approximately 6 sentences in your intro. If you follow the outline provided in the body paragraphs, you'll have anywhere between 5 to 7 sentences in your body paragraph at minimum. You could, of course, have more. You should not have less. And then in your conclusion, you'll have anywhere between 5 to 6 sentences. So if you need to, stop this video and take a look and read over that intricately. Otherwise, I'm just going to move forward. Of course, the hardest part of writing is coming up with ideas, and that all begins with evaluating the prompt and figuring out which side of the prompt you're on. When you write a persuasive paper, basically what you're doing is you're typically picking a side. So you'll want to read your prompt very carefully, make sure you understand exactly what they're asking of you, and then you'll want to write a thesis statement that, one, answers the question or the position. You identify what side you're on, and then I recommend that you include the qualifier word because. It reminds you that you have to have a cause relationship there, and then at least 2 ideas that you're going to be elaborating on in your paper. You'll notice in my starburst over there it says coming up with 2 sound ideas will take some thought and brainstorming. So oftentimes when you first read that prompt, you may be sitting there for just about 5 to 10 minutes going, okay, what do I think about this? What can I say about it? What can I write about it? And if you can have a strong thesis statement that you're going to use in your intro, in your body paragraphs, and as your topic sentences, and then back in your conclusion, you are going to be so much better for it. So this process really does take and requires a lot of time. Once you've established that thesis statement, then you're ready to move on. Make sure that when you read that prompt, you don't get sidetracked by background information. Make sure that you're actually honing in on what you need to address in this paper. If you look here on your screen, basically what this exemplifies is that there are 3 parts to your paper. There's the introduction, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion. And different people like to work on different parts of their paper at different times. Some students might like to, after they create their thesis, jump right into the introduction, where other students might like to work on the body paragraphs first. It depends on you. So this presentation is divided up into the 3 sections that you see here on the screen. We're going to start by talking about the intro and then move to body paragraphs and conclusions, but know that you can interchange as you need to and as your writing thought processes kind of dictate. So let's start here with introductions. You'll see here on your screen that your introduction should include those 3 components: writing hooks, connecting sentence, and the thesis statement. So here on this screen, it kind of breaks down an example of which one of those are. I know that most people already know what a writing hook is and can kind of ramble off a definition, but remember that your writing hook relates directly back to the prompt. It uses the key info from the prompt. It should focus on the key topic of the prompt, and the topic normally is communicated in 1 or 2 key words. So make sure you know what your prompt is actually asking you and what the topic of that prompt is. Secondly is the connecting sentence. The connecting sentence oftentimes gives students the most difficulty because they don't understand what they're doing there. So you come up with this great writing hook that kind of relates to the topic but doesn't reveal your thesis, and you have to figure out a bridge to tie those 2 together. So oftentimes the connecting sentence is literally the question that's being asked in the prompt. Just reflect back onto the strategies that you've used in class and the activities that you've done in class with that, and seek out a teacher for help in this if you need to. And finally, of course, your introduction ends with a thesis. So again, those 3 parts are the writing hook, connecting sentence, and the thesis statement. Moving on. The next several slides are going to discuss writing hooks and attention grabbers, and are going to break down how to create those. So on your screen here, there'll be an actual definition and just a little bit more information about them. And just moving forward, this screen will tell you how to write a question writing hook, and then here, how to write a definition writing hook, how to begin your paper with a short scene, how to begin your paper with a quote, beginning your paper with a simile or metaphor or some other type of figurative language device is always a great creative way to begin your paper. And again, you can refer to this slide to get specifics on how to do that. Beginning your paper with some advice is a great way to start, or even predicting the future. So the last several slides actually break down different strategies for writing hooks, and so feel free to pause this presentation as needed to read over the instructions for those. Once you've actually created a writing hook, and last one, sorry, you could begin with the dilemma. You then move on to creating your connecting sentence, and remember I previously said that that tends to give students the most difficulty, so I'll go over this slide verbatim. Your connecting sentence, again, builds a bridge between the hook and the thesis statement. Often it's the actual question that's being asked in the prompt. It can be reworded to be a statement, though, so it doesn't necessarily have to literally be a question with a question mark. You know, if the question is it a good idea for whatever, you can turn it into read in the connector, people question whether it's a good idea. So some people don't like to use questions in their writing, but you can do that. But again, seek out the help of a teacher or a strong writer to help you with this if need be. And that finishes up the introduction portion of this presentation. So remember that your intro is the first paragraph in your paper, and it should include a writing hook, a connecting sentence, and a thesis statement. Now the next part of your paper will be your body paragraphs, and depending on how many reasons you gave in your thesis statement, you may have 2, 3, who knows, by the time you get in college you might have 4 or even 10 body paragraphs, but all of them need to somehow relate back to the thesis statement. So let's take a look at that. Your body paragraphs, first and foremost, need to provide reasons and support for the position that you've chosen in your thesis. Your body paragraphs require the most elaboration and the most information. Your body paragraph should include specific examples and information like numbers and data and statistics, name, people, places, personal examples, references to credible sources. They can be fact or fiction. You can even make information up here in high school when you do your SOL writing. Feel free to make up stories that include people's names. That's totally fine. Your body paragraphs have a format. First of all, again, you should have 2 to 3 body paragraphs as far as writing here in your 10th grade or 11th grade English classes. Each one of those should be 6 sentences in length, and they should begin with a topic sentence and have a reason with some examples and a second reason with some examples. If you'll take a look here on the screen, what you have in front of you is I've started here with a thesis statement, just from a random prompt. Okay, so let's talk about how to create a topic sentence from a thesis statement. It's literally as easy as copy, paste, rephrase. So in the yellow, it reads, topic sentences are created by breaking the thesis into separate parts that correspond with the reasons they've given. You copy and paste the key information and replace some of the words with synonyms to give the appearance of unique creative thought rather than the copy-paste effort. So let's take a look at what you have here on your screen. The thesis statement that I begin with is, the federal government should do away with coins because 1, they are inconvenient, and 2, they are too costly to produce. So if I want to create topic sentences from that, I literally would copy that whole sentence and paste it maybe into my graphic organizer, maybe even into the beginning of my body paragraphs. Take a look here at the screen and see, here a topic sentence for body paragraph 1 reads, the federal government should do away with coins because coins are inconvenient. Note that the green information in my topic sentence corresponds with the green information in my thesis. See how that come from that? Now I did replace the word they with coins, changed it around just a little bit. Now if I were going to move on to create my second body paragraph, I would go back to my thesis statement. I could copy and paste it in there, but this time I need to get rid of that green information because that's reason 1. I'm on body paragraph 2, so I need to focus on reason 2. So notice how I kept the original thought was they're too costly to produce. I changed it around just a little bit and I put coins cost too much to produce. saying the same thing, only a little bit differently. Notice that I changed the red around. The original thesis said the federal government should do away with coins because, skipping over to reason 2, they are too costly. I rephrased it to read, another reason coins should be done away with by the federal government is because coins cost too much to produce. Same exact thought. So literally your thesis statement breaks apart and splits into 2 different sentences for your topic sentences. Now, in this presentation and in class, I have given you guys different graphic organizers to use to brainstorm information for body paragraphs. It looks like this, but please don't get bogged down by the text that's in the boxes. What I want to reiterate to you is that when you are brainstorming information to go in your body paragraphs, it is important to come up with as many ideas that you could possibly use, because you want to have a lot of ideas, and that way you get to pick and choose which ones are the best. Too often I see students come up with 2 ideas and that's all they stick with. And they've limited themselves and their paper isn't that good because they haven't put enough thought into it. I believe literally that brainstorming for your body paragraphs probably takes the most time of everything else, because coming up with the good ideas is the most important. Carrying them through and writing them will come easy if you really have solid information. So what I was saying is, make sure that you don't get too bogged down by the text in the boxes. What I want to encourage you to do is try to come up with 4 different things that you might be able to talk about. So if I go back to this example and say I were actually going to write the paper, the federal government should do away with coins because coins are inconvenient. When I come over to this graphic organizer, I'd put in my discussion point bullet, coins are too inconvenient, and I would try to come up with a personal example. Maybe a time where it's been inconvenient for me to use coins. Maybe a time while I observe something. I mean, all the time I see old ladies in the grocery store hunt for pennies and it takes forever and it's inconvenient for her, the clerk, and for me. I could try to come up with any kind of information related to coins being inconvenient that I've seen in the news or TV. And, you know, that might be challenging. You might not come up with something that relates specifically to media. So come up with something else, another personal example. Okay, interview somebody. Go out and say, hey, friend, have you ever found coins inconvenient? So maybe change that to interviewing if you need to. And then we've got an other box here for anything else. Maybe something you've read in a book or just something else that you make up if you want to. The key is you try to come up with as much information as you can and just put some bullet pointed information in these graphic organizers to give yourself options when you begin to write. And remember, all of this can be fiction if you want it to. So if I were actually going to take this prompt that you see here on the screen, what I would do is I would take the fact that they're inconvenient and put it here in this round bubble. Coins are inconvenient, and brainstorm ideas. And that would be for body paragraph 1. Going back, the second body paragraph would be about they're too costly to produce. So I would move over to the body paragraph 2 brainstorming bubble, and I would brainstorm ideas about how coins are too costly to. So again, if I went back, I would just be brainstorming information about how coins cost too much to produce, and I may not have a personal example. So for this particular one, I might actually make things up. I mean, I might actually make up how much it costs to make a penny and how much it costs to make a nickel and dollars and all that good stuff. Or I might discuss information about how the federal government could be spending their money on other things besides producing money. But the key that, again, I want to reiterate is that you try to come up with as much information as you can. And, you know, sometimes when you're brainstorming for your body paragraphs, you may realize, darn, I don't know enough about this discussion point to actually use it in my thesis. So I've got to go back and come up with a new one. And that's what this process is for. So with this graphic organizer, just bullet point. Don't feel like you're writing paragraphs here. This is not a 4 square. This is a brainstorming kind of page for you. Now, once you have brainstormed plenty of information for your body paragraphs and you already know how to create those topic sentences, then you're going to start putting it together. So I want to take a moment to kind of just go through the process of creating body paragraphs. On your screen here, you see a prompt that we have here. In short, the question that's being asked in this prompt is, should high school students have to take 2 years of gym classes or to actually graduate, or should it be optional? So my thesis statement is Virginia high school students should be required to complete 2 years of physical education classes to receive their diploma because these classes promote good health and they provide students an opportunity to, and that's supposed to be de-stress and get active during the day. So I already have my thesis statement, and now I'm going to move over to creating a body paragraph. Now, what I have here on the screen is I've created my body paragraph. I've created this topic sentence by taking that thesis statement and going through that strategy of copy and pasting, and then just keeping the first reason here for the first body paragraph. So when we read this, it says Virginia high school students should be required to complete 2 years of physical education classes to receive their diploma because these classes promote good health. And I included 2 reasons to support this. Okay, again, because these classes promote good health, and so I continue by saying physical education classes provide a great opportunity for students to learn the correct way to perform physical activities so as not to get hurt. That promotes good health. And then secondly, I said students are taught health in these classes as well. Well, that certainly promotes good health. But this first body paragraph is very weak and underdeveloped. I mean, yeah, I've given some reasons, but I haven't really supported it. If you look at the second example of my body paragraph, I've developed this one much more. You'll notice that the text in blue corresponds with the text in blue in both of these samples, and the text in red corresponds with the text in red. So read over that and see what I've done. I've kept the statement, physical education classes provide a great opportunity for students to learn the correct way to perform physical activities so as not to get hurt. But then I stopped and I said, okay, can I give any examples to support this? So I gave the reason, and now I want real life examples. So I put, for example, and notice that transitional term. I like when students include transitional terms like for example, or what this means, or first or second. That kind of guides the reader, and it also encourages you or reminds you that you have to give examples and you have to walk through this process of reason 1 and reason 2. So anyway, continuing on, I put, for example, gym teachers teach activities ranging from the correct way to jump, how to play various sports, proper running techniques, as well as many other physical activities that require skill and proper techniques. So I've said that the physical education classes teach the correct way to do things, and then I gave examples of those. And then continuing on, my next reason is that students are taught health in these classes as well, but I wanted to kind of include a transition, kind of a way to help guide my readers. So I started that sentence here with, along with the physical activity, students are taught health in these classes as well. So I kind of go back to what I just told you and now what I'm about to tell you. And I include an example of what that means for the student. My example reads, students learn healthy eating habits, personal hygiene habits, and how to take care of their bodies properly. So I've given a reason and then I've given examples. Now in this, I could have just as easily said, Coach Stevens teaches students the correct way to do sit-ups so that they don't sprain their ab muscles. Or Coach Hartless teaches students how to walk properly so that they don't damage their knees. So you could literally include examples with people's names in them in here as well. So those are some examples of weak and underdeveloped body paragraphs and a more developed body paragraph. Let's move on to conclusions and counter-arguments now. The conclusion is the last paragraph in your paper, and conclusions actually are my fun, or what I consider the most fun to write, because conclusions are basically the upside down or the mirror image of a thesis, of a introduction. If your introduction begins with an attention grabber, a connecting sentence, and a thesis, then I kind of shine a mirror on that, an upside down mirror, and now my conclusions are kind of the opposite. They have a thesis statement, but I divide it into 2. A counter argument, so instead of a connector, I have a counter. And then I go back to that attention grabber, or you can do what we say, or perform a call to action. So let's take a look and see exactly what all this means. Okay, first of all, to restate your thesis statement in the conclusion, let's take a look at what the slide says. It says first you copy and paste your thesis as the first sentence of the conclusion. So literally, you take your thesis, you copy it, you paste it, and then step 2 says replace the word because with a period. Capitalize the first word after that period, and there you go. Now, finally, what you want to do is go through and replace 3 or more words with some synonyms to make it sound a little different, because you know, you guys have always been taught don't copy and paste, and As far as formula, it's a great idea to copy and paste. But as far as creativity, it's not. So you want to rephrase it sometimes. So notice what I had in my original. It said students should not have to select a career at a young age because most students are too indecisive to make this type of major decision at such an early age. And many jobs will be obsolete within the next 10 years, so it would be wasteful. So I copied it, and I now have students should not have to select a career at a young age, period, instead of because. Continuing on, most students are too indecisive to make this type of major decision at such an early age, and many jobs will be obsolete within the next 10 years. Now, the next process again would be to replace 3 or more words, but notice how easy transitioning into that conclusion is by copying and pasting that thesis. Next, you want to include a counter-argument, and hopefully your class has already viewed the proper steps for creating a counter-argument. A counter-argument is when you take a look at the opposite side. In other words, if your thesis is students should not have to select a career at a young age, that's what you believe, that students should not, the counter to that is that students should. So a good writer will acknowledge that there is an opposite side. They'll acknowledge that other people believe something different, and they'll even explain why. But then a good writer will explain why that's still not a good enough reason to choose their side over yours. So, for a counter-argument, what you do is you identify the opposite side. Once you identify the opposite side, you even give one reason why they might take that position. That's your because statement. But then you're going to follow it up and explain why this reason is still not a good enough reason to side with these people. And you put it all together, and what you have is you have a well-formulated counter-argument to go in your conclusion. So let's take a look at an example counter-argument. So here on your screen, you see it here at the top, a thesis statement. Students should not have to volunteer to graduate from high school because many students are already too busy to devote time to volunteering, and being forced to volunteer isn't really volunteering at all. So the position that this writer has taken is that students should not have to volunteer to graduate from high school. Now the counter to that would be the students should have to volunteer. That's the opposite. But remember, when you create a counter argument, you let people know there are other people that believe that. Not you, but others. So if your thesis says students should, your counter argument says, well, others believe that students should not. Okay, so again, let's read this. Students should not have to volunteer to graduate from high school because many students are already too busy to devote time to volunteering, and being forced to volunteer isn't really volunteering at all anyway. So the counter position to that is many people believe that students should have to volunteer to graduate. Now, to create an effective counter argument, you give one reason why they believe that. So many people believe that students should have to volunteer to graduate from high school because volunteering builds character. That's what they say. And now you follow that up with kind of a rebuttal. You refute it. So again, many people believe that students should have to volunteer to graduate from high school because volunteering builds character. But students can do other things to build their character rather than giving up their free time. So right here in this section in C, that's where you get to go back to your position, to go back to your thought that students shouldn't have to do that. That's where you refute that counter argument and you disprove what the other people believe. And that just lends credibility to your argument. So when I put it all together, my counter argument that would go in my conclusion says, many people believe that students should have to volunteer to graduate from high school because volunteering builds character. But students can do other things to build their character rather than giving up their free time. That's my counter argument for my conclusion. Now, to finish up your conclusion, you're going to finish up by going back to the writing hook or creating a call to action. So, step 1, refer back to the writing hook and model your last sentence from this. So if you defined a word, finish it up by giving one final impactful definition for that same word. If you ask a thought-provoking question, finish up by asking another similar question or maybe even answering a question. If you began by telling a story, go back to the story. Go back to the characters and give the rest of the story or the future of the story, if you will. So that's one way to finish up. Now, another way to finish up your conclusion is perform or include a call to action. What you're doing here is you're basically talking to your audience members. So, if you wrote a paper going back to why students shouldn't have to volunteer, you ask yourself, okay, who would have been my audience? Who would I have been writing this paper to? I probably would have been writing this paper to teachers or administrators or parents or even to students, trying to get them excited. So I would identify who the audience for my paper is, whether it's students, parents, teachers, lawmakers, legislators, and I'd write a sentence telling these people what to do. It would sound something like, students need to unite and force their administrators to do away with volunteering, or teachers need to join with students to support them in their efforts to not have to volunteer. So basically a call of action is when you challenge your audience members to do something now with the information that you're giving to them. That's a great way to end your paper. It tends to be dramatic and emotional and kind of end with a bang, and that's what you want. So here on the next slide, we have an example of that upside down or that reverse model. You can read over this introduction and then this conclusion that ends with a call to action. Okay. So, and just a review of what a counter argument is, if you want to go through that again. Here are some sample counter argument kind of fill in the blank statements. You could say many people believe, it's often thought, one could easily argue, or what have you. So take a look at those and decide which one you want to use, because remember, your counter argument is what the other people believe, not what you believe, but the other people. Okay, and let's end this presentation with a few do's and don'ts. When you're finishing up your paper, always go back and be sure that your thesis is in the right place. Is it the last sentence of your intro? Read that sentence by itself in isolation. Read the prompt again and then read your thesis and say, did I actually answer that question? Make sure that you do this. Make sure that your paper captures your reader's attention. Make sure that you have an interesting introduction. That is so key. I don't want to say you want to trick your audience, but, part of telling a good story is getting them from the very beginning. If you can get them from the very beginning, and even if you make a few mistakes in the middle, you've got their attention, and that sometimes is half the battle. Make sure that your topic sentences go back to your thesis statement. That's why we recommend the copy, paste, revise method. Include keywords and terms from the prompt all over your paper. If you're writing a paper about choosing a career, make sure the word career appears in every paragraph. If you're writing a paper about volunteering, make sure the word volunteer appears in every paragraph. Be purposeful in this. Review any checklist that's provided to you from your teacher. You want to know how you're going to get graded, so you know how to write your paper and what revisions you need to do to make a great grade on this paper. Make sure that you have a counter argument, and be sure at minimum that you have 4 paragraphs. There's no way to persuade an audience with just 3 paragraphs. Now, when you write your paper, please check and make sure that you have not used second person. If you've used the word you, your, or yours in your paper, replace it with words such as a person, an individual, one, students, whatever the case may be. But be purposeful in editing the word you out of your paper. Avoid pronouns, but if you use them, make sure you have an antecedent. If you use the word they, make sure that the noun or the antecedent that the word they stands for appears somewhere before the pronoun appears. Don't say they, and I'm left saying, well, who are they? I don't know. Make sure that word students or parents or lawmakers or whatever appears somewhere in that paragraph before pronoun. And finally, don't use slang. There's nothing worse than an informal language, because if you have a stuffy audience or if you have a stuffy grader and they read slang, they automatically want to take points off. So make sure that you keep it formal and legitimate, not legit. Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, feel free to go back and go to the proper section as needed. I know the presentation is lengthy, but it's meant for your use and for you to go back and review. So I'm going to finish up by leaving you with the outline version of what your paper should look like. Always refer back to this when you're asking that question, what do I do first? The first thing you do, I would say, is start with your thesis, and then you decide where you want to go from there. Do you want to write your introduction first? Do you want to write your body paragraphs? And by all means, make sure you have plenty of extra paper, plenty of brainstorming paper that you can work with, and ask for feedback from your teachers and other people. Happy writing.